First base is membership. Membership in the Big C church. Membership in the local church. Okay, so accepting Christ, being baptized, joining a church. That was first base there. Now we're moving into second base, and we call these habits of maturity. Okay, so these habits will help you mature, and we're going to cover devotional time today. Let me go with my story here. I get up out of bed, let my head clear a little bit, grab my phone, check these phones are amazing, aren't they? Check my calendar, see what I'm going to be doing today, switch over to my notes where I've got my to-do list today. I think about that. I'm a little bit tempted. I wonder what's going on Facebook. Click on Facebook. Start scrolling. That's pretty interesting, seeing what everybody else is doing. There's my cousin. Go through that, and then you can switch over, and there's little videos you can watch where people are all crashing, and it's kind of crazy and funny, and might watch those for a while. And then, I'm curious how the basketball game went last night, and so I can look it up on YouTube, and I can watch the NBA basketball game in 9 minutes or something like that. And that YouTube is programmed to pull up other videos that are going to be entertaining to me, and I can run with that. And I haven't worked out yet today. I need to go work out. I got to get to work pretty soon, so I'm going to go do a quick workout, and then it's time to rush off to work, and then come back home from work. And life gets busy, and things can just occupy our mind, and we can drift and not pause and connect with our Creator. That kind of a rush-by lifestyle doesn't work well in marriage, doesn't work well with my wife. There's times when we are just, today was one of them. Boom, boom. The one time I saw her, she was on the phone, and then I was out of there, and I haven't seen her yet. And that works for a day, but it doesn't work very long for a lifetime and a good relationship. And so it's healthy for my wife and I, or anybody that I'm in relationship with, to pause and have time together. And it is healthy for us to do that with God. And I would say that our relationship with God is our primary relationship, even above our spouses, our kids, our work relationships, all those times. And it's appropriate to prioritize that and spend some just one-on-one time with God. It is a time-tested practice. Let me read the italic part. The italic part, HCC disciples will have a regular quiet time, I call it quiet time, devotional time with the Lord, involving various relational activities like prayer, scripture reading, and surrender. Luke 5:16, if you see that verse, we don't have to turn there. Let me just say, I'll read it to you. It is, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus often withdrew. In another part of Scripture it says he prayed as was his habit, or he went to the garden as was his habit. A powerful reason to have a devotional time is it appears that Jesus had a devotional time. And we're followers of Jesus. We want to emulate the way he lived, and he had prayer time. A second one, let's turn to Psalm 1. Psalms are right in the middle of the Bible, begins with a P. Psalm chapter 1. It says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. So don't do those things. But whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked, they're like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will lead to destruction. The Bible often describes two different paths, right? There's the way of following God, there's the way of not following God. And one of the ways that we follow God is by meditating on his law day and night, okay? The Bible says you'll be like this fruitful stream planted by a tree of water, a mature tree, okay? And that's what this is all about. This whole baseball diagram is we're trying to identify things that will help you to be mature as a believer. And meditating on his law, meditating on the Bible is one of those things. And being regularly in prayer and conversation with Jesus is one of those things, okay? So time with him. I tried to, so if you look at the bullet list here, I tried to put this in Kim, you've got the Jesus calling, so they tried to write it as if Jesus were talking to you, which is a unique way of doing a devotional. And that actually is a devotional book, and I know several people who will read a devotional book. Karen, if I remember right, you're doing the YouVersion devotions, right? Mm-hmm. So there's on their phone devotions, there's book devotions, and there's people that will do this a lot. But I wrote this as if Jesus were talking to you. Okay, so he's sending the invite. He's like, hey, let's spend some consistent time together, and he's going to give you all the reasons why. I'll listen to you. Be nice. We can consider your day together. I'll help you see things from the spiritual side of life. I will reveal myself to you and help you know me better. You can give me your burdens. Let me help you with them. This will lighten your load. We can enjoy our relationship together. Sometimes I just like to sit out on the back deck with Kathleen. We don't have an agenda. We're just enjoying each other. Sometimes I try to do that with God too. I don't have to go through my prayer list or whatever. We're just enjoying time. Might take a walk. Just being aware of his presence. I will guide you. I'll give you assignments for the day. You can have some time to worship me and recommit to me. I'll hear your prayers. I'll answer them. I will hear your confession of sin and remind you of my grace and love for you. I will better align you with what you were created for. I'll help you understand your new identity in me. I'll share stories with you about things I've done. And lastly, I tend to rub off on people. You'll become more like me as we spend time together, and this will bring you joy. This time to pause and to be with the Lord is something that we want to push and promote because we think it will benefit you in these ways and many more, and it will mature you. I don't know anybody, I'm sure there probably are people that don't do this daily, but I don't know anybody that I know is mature that doesn't do this regularly. Every mature believer that I know does this regularly. So it's just something that was taught to me. Now here's where if I can correct anything that maybe you've heard in the past, I'd like to do this. Some people think the only way to do this is at 6 a.m, get up, go to a chair, read a chapter of the Bible, respond in prayer on your prayer list, and that's your quiet time. And that's the only way to have a quiet time, okay? Now that is a way to have a quiet time, and it's not a bad idea to have a specific spot that you go to or to read a chapter. I encourage people to read a chapter a day for the rest of their lives of the Bible and to have a prayer list. So those could all be part of it. But it doesn't have to be the only way to have a quiet time, okay? I know people that do it at night. I know people that on their commute into Columbia turn off the radio and that's their prayer time. I know people that use their phones and do devotions. I know people that do the written books. I know people that have devotions with their spouse together. Even though I feel like this is a one-on-one time, kind of opened up my eyes. Well, I guess you can do that with your spouse too, like they have a devotion together with God. I know people that take a walk. I know people that go sit out in the woods. There's a lot of different things that you can have happen. I wrote more. I know people that just sit in silence. That would be a good thing to do with YouTube or podcasts or whatever, that we can grow spiritually and connect with God. We use 2 books. I should have brought them in. We use 2 books with our summer staff. One is called Sacred Pathways, and it lists 9 different ways, 9 different worship styles. Like there's different personality styles. There's also different worship styles. And you might have a different worship style than somebody else. So your devotional time doesn't have to look like everybody else's. Another is victorious praying. We do that with our staff as well. It helps them to develop their prayer pathways. I know people that do it for an hour. We assign our staff an hour devotional time when they're here, the college students that are with us. I know people that do it for 5 minutes instead. I know people that make memory verses a part of it. And I know people that pray for certain things on different days of the week. I know people that go into their actual closet and pray. That's their spot. Or the deck, or their favorite chair, or a swing out by the creek. That's my favorite spot. Okay, those are all the ways why have a devotional time? So it grows you in maturity, all these ways, and there's lots of different ways to do this. And I think I would benefit from hearing your experience with this, or what you've been taught in the past or heard in the past. All right, gang. So we moved to second base last time, but we're right there, and we call these habits of maturity. All right. So that's there are different habits that mature believers have, and one of those, there's a little nuance on this small group one. So let's start with small groups, and then we'll move on to the giving of money. I think the very first small group I was a part of, I was at an FCA retreat. We were at William Jewell College, and somebody would give a talk, and then we'd break up into these groups. And I remember this other guy he was this real buff football player, and I remember him saying, I want to live for God, or I want to play for Jesus and His glory this season. And I was into sports, and I was kind of in awe of how big his muscles were. And that made an impact on me. Just that comment from another peer about how they wanted to live for Jesus affected me and made me want to live for Jesus too. And so small groups, they are, here, let me check out just on the italics first. HCC disciples will be active in small groups with the goal of growing in fellowship, partnership with other believers. But the asterisk below is important here. Small groups are a means to an end. They're not the end in themselves. We believe that small groups are an incubator for authentic fellowship, transparent, mutually uplifting partnerships among believers. That's kind of a mouthful. But to summarize it, it's when I'm around certain people, I have more motivation to want to follow Jesus. Now, that's what we're after. We're after maturity. We're after motivating you and helping you grow and learn. Small groups are a means to an end. All right. So just being in a small group doesn't guarantee that happens. And if there's another way to get that done without a small group, fine. We'll cancel that on that base and put something else in there. I just don't know anything else that's more effective at bringing about what we're trying to get done besides a small group. And by small groups, like at our church, I mean like Sunday school classes. I would call this a small group right now. Some of our Bible studies, some of I'd even call like the group that's getting together to do buddy bags today. They put together food, they went shopping, they delivered it to people. That group is forming a bond because of what they're doing. So that's the idea. I think I had my first small group experience in high school. We didn't have it in the church that I grew up in. Then I went to college, and I attended a Campus Crusade for Christ meeting, like 2 weeks in, and one of the leaders got a hold of me, and we turned in comment cards. He got a hold of me and said, "Hey, can you meet with me? I'm forming a group of guys for a Bible study." And we met in one of the dorm rooms. He grabbed about me and 4 other guys, and we started doing a Bible study with us that weekly. And 2 of those guys became future roommates. 2 of them were groomsmen in my wedding. It became this bond of friendship that really helped me through college, and they were all pursuing Jesus, and it was really cool. When I graduated from college, I moved to Centralia, and in Centralia, a guy grabbed me and said, "Hey, I'm forming a prayer group," and me and another guy and him, we would meet at the park and sit at the picnic tables, and we would pray together. When I joined a church, we got involved in Sunday school classes and got to meet people that way. Kathleen and I began to lead I meant to bring my book in. Kathleen and I began to lead a discipleship's essential class where we met with some couples, and for about 6 months, it was us and 2 other couples. We met in our house, we studied some material together, and then we'd break up, guys and girls, and we'd just kind of talk about life and how we could pray for one another. Again, the deepest friendships that I've formed have come from these small groups. When I moved over as pastor at Harrisburg Christian, I met with 3 other guys every week. We called it accountability. Kind of basically, we didn't do a Bible study together, but we basically just got raw and open with each other. How are you doing? And tried to help each other grow. I taught Sunday school class here. We didn't used to have 2 services. We used to have Sunday school, and then we'd have another service. And so I was available to teach Sunday school and did that for a while. Led some small groups, been a part of the yearly campaign that we do each year. 13 years ago, maybe, I got invited by a pastor in Columbia to come every Thursday morning and meet with him and a couple other pastors, and just encouraging and mentoring me. And I've been doing that every Thursday. I'll be there again tomorrow. They've become really close friends, but also mentors to me along the way. I used to lead praise team practice, and when we'd get ready for the songs for the week, but then we'd also pray for one another, and we'd talk about what it means to worship. So all these times, I think I've probably been in part of a small group since I was 18, and I'm 55 now, and I think there's probably been small groups that I've been a part of ever since then. Jersey Mike's group would be another one. I think that's kind of how I first met Josh. And so I love small groups. They accomplish some things, and let's go through that list here. Here's the things that they've accomplished in me, and I see them accomplishing in other people. Not every small group is it's not, they're not all the same or whatever, but here's things that happen in small groups. Number 1, Bible study happens. People learn from one another. A lot of people leave a small group and they said, "I learned something tonight." All right, so that's a neat thing. Second one, common goals, connecting with others who are growing spiritually and centered on God. A lot of people will leave a small group and they'll think, "I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that's trying to follow Jesus." Prayer takes place in small groups. It's where some of the more private prayer requests get shared in small groups. Karen's part of one, the Friday morning one, and I know there's an email list that goes out for prayer groups. So sometimes it's that group that's praying for each other. Support, caring for and serving one another. Sometimes it's the small groups that are the ones that are doing meals for a person who's in the hospital, or they know more of the things that are going on in somebody's life. Number 5, transparent conversation. It's a place, and again, not all small groups are the same, but some of these small groups you can be really, really open, transparent with people. Praise, you can acknowledge it's time. It's in the small group a lot of times. So Kim, story's encouraging to me. So it's in small groups where somebody says, hey, guess what? I feel like God's answered our prayer last week. So you get those kinds of encouragement. You talk about the things that God has done. And outreach. So reaching out to others as a group and being a light by loving one another. And I think of the Buddy Bags group that met today. So sometimes it's the small groups that are reaching out and doing something. We had a small group decorate the church or whatever else may happen. So small groups, they all have their own kind of DNA, and they all accomplish usually at least one of these, and oftentimes multiple ones of these. Again, we encourage everybody to be a part of a small group. Not every small group is the same, and it's not about small groups, it's about developing authentic relationships with other believers. And there's maybe other ways to do that. We just know that small groups are one of the ways that gets done. As kind of a final motivator, John chapter 13, Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you. Love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another. I know it's difficult, to be a part of it, and I want to hear your stories here in just a second, but to be a part of small groups, it's difficult. It's an extra time commitment. It's jumping in. Sometimes if you're new, it's getting to know some new people. It's a little bit awkward, but to have authentic relationships with other believers is worth the effort, because Jesus loves the church and he wants us to love one another. He's calling us to do that, and he says it's going to be a beacon to the rest of the world by how well you guys love one another. Other people are going to realize that you're his disciples. So that's kind of the motivator. It's like, okay, it's worth the effort for me to, for me, a lot of times I'm starting a small group, or it's worth the effort for me to get into tomorrow into Columbia for that group that I meet with, because I'm loving other people and I'm growing and maturing through it. So I'm a big fan of small groups. All right, let's move to the next one, which is giving money. I want to throw out a couple of disclaimers right off the bat. I'm not after your money. I am after your maturity. Okay, that this is about maturity. It's not about money. Personally, as the pastor of this church, I do not know how much individual people give to HCC. So I am not and I don't want to be, and I'm thankful that I don't have to be. But I am not in the know on how much you donated last year or whatever. There is one person only who's in the know, and that's our church secretary, and she needs to be in the know because she writes the tax deductible receipts and all that. So I'm not in the know on that, don't want to be in the know on that. We do try to be transparent as a church, and if you come to the congregational meetings, you can see our ledgers and all those things. That's an option. The other thing, I need a disclaimer right off the bat. I'm not promoting a prosperity doctrine. And what I mean by that, there is, you can go to some places and be taught that if you give, God will bless you financially, you'll be richer afterwards. Or he'll make sure that you don't get sick, or whatever that's what I mean by prosperity doctrine. So I'm not promoting that, but I can see how tempting it would be to teach that because of the verses that I'm going to share with you and because of my own experience. All right, but I'm not intending to teach that right off the bat. Personally, my journey in this, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I do remember that my weekly allowance was $5. My parents gave me $5 a week, and so whatever age I was when that happened, and I remember that our church had these little envelopes, kind of like the white envelopes we have in our pews, and I remember that I would take 50 cents every week, I would stick it in that white envelope, and I would put it in the collection plate at church. And I somewhere in my mind which was probably 5th, 6th grade, I got in my mind that I was going to take a tenth of what I earned, which was my allowance at that time. I was going to take a tenth and I was going to give it back to God. I assume my parents taught me that, or the church taught me that. I don't remember the direct thing, but the idea of a tithe or a 10% giving is something that I've practiced ever since. Our church also models this. So of the amount of money that comes into our church budget in a year, we intentionally take a tenth of that and give it to missionaries or local needs. So the buddy bags that were being done today, that came out of that 10% that we're trying to just intentionally give away. So that's just a few things in the background. And as a result, so that's been a part of my life as long as I've made at least $5 in allowance. And God has provided in some interesting and very meaningful ways in my life. And that's some of these God incident stories that I want to share with you. But let's look at the idea, the principle here. So S3, giving money. HCC disciples will see themselves as managers of God's money, not owners of their own money. So it's a mentality shift. It's not saying it's my money. We start saying this is God's money. That's the shift we're trying to make. They will regularly give of their finances to build the kingdom of God. Managers of God's money, some people use the word stewards. You might hear somebody say we try to be good stewards of God's money. That's another phrase you'll hear often. All right, motivations to give. Again, not just so we can have money at church, I don't even know that. I wouldn't even say that it has to be to our church. Okay, so I'm not trying to say that either, but I am saying there's something about giving that is connected to maturity. All right, and let me share these passages to you. Number one, the heart follows the money. In Matthew 6:21, Jesus says, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And the analogy that makes sense to me, like I don't go to the horse races and bet on horses, but if I did, even if I didn't know the horse, if I bet on Lucky Strike, as soon as that bell goes off, I'd be like, "Come on, Lucky Strike!" I'm rooting for whatever I put my money down on. And there is something about if we give money to the kingdom of God, we root for it. It affects our heart in a certain way. Number two, a disciple is marked by giving everything to the Lord. In Luke chapter 14, verse 33, Jesus says something like, "Those who do not give up everything cannot be my disciples." It's like, wow. Like he wants us to turn over everything in our life. Not just you can have this piece of me or this piece of me. And sometimes we want to hold on to our finances as a part of that. Number three, God blesses those who give their first and best. And again, I'm trying not to promote a prosperity doctrine, but in Proverbs 3, it says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your harvest. Then your barns will be filled to overfilling and your vats will brim over with new wine." I don't know if I said that exactly, but it's basically giving God the first and the best, and God will bless you and provide for you. Number four, giving allows us to store up treasure in heaven. In Philippians, Paul is talking to a church about their giving, and he's like, "It's not about the giving. I desire what may be credited to your account," as if God's going to bless you in a certain way. Credit this to your account in the way that you give. I do want us to turn to a passage because there's a longer passage in 2 Corinthians.
The Luke one?
Yeah, what's it say in what's it say in?
So you cannot become a disciple without giving up everything you own.
Okay, and that's how the NLT translates that. Yeah, that's pretty heavy. Jesus talking about that. All right. Where am I starting? Verse 6. All right. Remember this. A farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide in your heart how much to give. And don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. So, it's up. Let it be. I'm not trying to pressure anybody to give or to give more than what you're given or whatever. But I do want you to listen to what God will call you, how He will call you to be generously. And whatever you give, do it cheerfully. Because if you're going to just say, all right, whatever, here, you've just kind of blown the whole thing. You might as well just keep your money if that's how it's going to be. And then it says, verse 8, and God will generously provide all you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. As the scriptures say, they share freely and give generously to the poor. Their good deeds will be remembered forever. For God is the one who provides seed for the farmer and then bread to eat. In the same way, He will provide and increase your resources and then produce a great harvest of generosity in you. So God, there's this interaction that we have with God, that we give and He gives us, and we turn around and be generous with that, and He turns around and He's generous with us. There's an interaction, and that's why I want to read some of these stories to you here in just a moment. In verse 11, though, it says, yes, you will be enriched in every way so that you can also be generous. And when we take your gifts to those who need them, they will thank God. So 2 good things will result from the ministry of giving. The needs of the believers in Jerusalem will be met, and they will joyfully express their thanks to God. So another one of the reasons we give is because people see that as, wow, God just took care of me. And so we want to be generous with what we have in our giving. The last one on there, number 7, giving money away keeps us from being trapped by it. And this is another one of those heavy statements. Jesus says, no one can serve 2 masters. You'll either love one and hate the other, or be devoted to one, or despise the other. And then He says you cannot serve both God and money. So, and this is coming up in a sermon in a couple of weeks. And then Alex is sharing more about it the week after that. But Jesus warns us about this. Like, here's something that can really grab your heart, and we don't want to let it grab our hearts. And one of the ways we keep it from grabbing our hearts is by giving it away. It takes away some of the power that money can have on us. Asterisk down at the bottom. Several HCC members use the 10% tithe commanded in the Old Testament as an example to follow today. Our church budget reflects this as well, and we would encourage you to consider that model and create a spending plan to help you organize your finances and prioritize giving. Again, there's not a requirement on how much to give or whatever. You decide what you're going to do. You'll see a lot in the Old Testament talks about tithing. It does talk about it a little bit in the New Testament, but more in the Old Testament. And that word tithing means a tenth. And somebody told me that when I was in 5th or 6th grade, and I've just tried to continue in that pattern. It's not like the end. It's not like the limit, like 10%'s God's and 90%'s mine, because Jesus said, you give everything to me and you're the steward. So it's just kind of seeing, I'm the steward. God, what would you have me do with what you've placed in my life? And we know He wants us to be generous. We know that He wants us to be cheerful givers. And there is something about this that connects us to maturity. And missing this keeps us where we're holding something back from God, and that's not a mature thing that we're doing. Spending plan is not, the purpose of this is not to talk about a spending plan, but that is something that I help people do. And at our church, and many of you have probably done financial planning or things like that before. But basically, Kathleen and I figure out what we're going to make in a month, and we break it down in categories. Here's how much we need for this. We need this much for groceries. We need this much for our electrical bill. And we intentionally take a portion, and this is how much we're going to give. And we decide at the beginning of the month what we're going to give. We don't wait till the end of the month to see if there's any left over. We just try to see if we try to get those categories as soon as we can. And we are currently on a spending freeze until 4 more days pass by. So we get to the budget is tight at times, and this is one of those months. Folks watching the video, if you have got Incidents book, it's page 17, 21, and 28 have the 3 stories that we're going to read. Thanks.